Abandoned buildings are amazing. My mother studied historical preservation in Georgia, so a love for dilapidated and abandoned structures is in my blood. When you pair this interest with my love of photography, you have a match made in heaven, and fortunately, this pairing is seen as favorable by many of my friends as well. As a rule, I never enter an abandoned building by myself. This has less to do with caution or fear. As I'm a stocky, bearded 22-year-old male, I don't often fear for my safety, but it's primarily for safety reasons. When a structure has been left to rot for X number of years, there's a decent chance that you could go through the floor if you're not careful. Where I live, in southwestern Ohio, there are many great exploration opportunities to be found, especially if you take a 15-minute drive to cross into Indiana. A place called Richmond. On one of the main strips before you enter the city, there's a massive hospital that has been abandoned since the early 2000s. I had known about this location for ages, as my grandfather had stayed there before during his battle with lung cancer. Last year, I finally found the time and energy to drive up with my friend Luke to check it out. We got there about 2 p.m., which gave us roughly 2 hours before dusk would begin. For pictures and for safety, we had agreed that daylight was a must for this expedition. Upon entering the hospital, it became immediately clear that we were far from the first people to ever visit. The entire place was gutted, and there was graffiti everywhere. The walls sporting comforting phrases like, "We're watching you," and "Leave my house now." The bulk of the trip was uneventful. We got some great shots and covered some of the primary hospital wings, steering clear of the psych wards and cancer centers. As we gradually made our way up the stairwell to each new floor, we began to notice a pattern. At each landing was a door, and each door had been propped open by a massive wedge of cement or other debris. The doors were shockingly heavy, so we assumed that roving graffiti artists and vandals had opted for an easier floor access. Granted, it seemed odd, but we didn't think much about it until we were in the 7th floor. I was in one of the old bedrooms, getting a shot of some curtains while Luke stood in the doorway. Suddenly, a massive boom sounded from the stairwell we had just come from, causing Luke and I to jolt upright. It sounded like it had come from below us, like one of the doors had suddenly slammed. The problem was that none of the doors could have slammed, at least not on their own. Not only were they separated from the door frame by massive chunks of debris, but they were far too heavy to have caught wind. The only way a door could have slammed was if someone had stood back, held it fully open, and then let it go. Not a behavior that one would normally engage in without a purpose. After a few seconds of staring at each other with saucer eyes, we decided it was time to go. This meant finding another way down, as our previous way was currently occupied by someone. There were little green arrows spray painted all over the building, and on a gut decision, we decided to try and follow them. The ones on this floor had all the words "exit" written above them, so we felt good about it. It wasn't until we had been following the arrows for 5 minutes or so that we realized wherever they were taking us, it wasn't out of the building. In our fear and desire to leave as quickly as possible, we had neglected to realize that the arrows were taking us deeper into the center of the building. Windows were becoming less frequent, and everything was getting darker, and everything was damp. That was the weirdest part, how damp everything was. We had gone from destroyed but dry building into an area that was so wet and rife with mold that the walls and floors were going a greenish brown. We never found out what it was at the end of the path, or who was leading or pushing us where. After turning back, we found an emergency exit in the corner of the end of the hallway we were able to climb down and escape from. We never saw anyone, but we're sure they saw us. The hospital was mostly windows, which means that literally anyone looking out would have been able to see us coming and going. I'm glad we didn't go further into the dark, wet areas. Who knows what would have been awaiting us there, but surely it wouldn't have been anything good. The door, the spray-painted directions, It all seemed too sinister and intentional to be anything like an innocent vandal's prank. The entire time we were following the arrows, something just felt off. The hair was up on the back of my neck, and I was frankly terrified. Back in college, my friends and I got into the habit of exploring abandoned buildings. We've seen some incredible places and have gotten some pretty cool souvenirs. I don't really condone taking stuff from buildings, but if it's about to be torn down and contractors have taken everything out they deem worth something, then I'll gradually take the depression glass they left behind. It's a small group of friends that goes exploring with me, and I love introducing new people to it. A friend of mine had asked me on several occasions if I could take him somewhere because he had never went exploring before. I decided to take him to an old paper factory that didn't have much inside, but had an absolutely beautiful view of the city from the roof. Also, it was incredibly easy to get in and out of. We went with a few other people, but two of my friends had decided to wait outside for us since they had been in the building a few too many times and didn't really find it interesting anymore. As we went to climb inside, a drunk couple came out. It wasn't unusual. A lot of people use this building to smoke, drink, or paint in, and we asked if there were many people inside. They said that they thought it was mostly empty, but they heard someone banging around a few floors up, and that startled them out. They said he sounded angry, and maybe we should avoid the roof. Since we weren't there to drink or anything, the roof was our only goal. We decided we'll take our chances and head up. After all, it's a massive building, and we didn't think we would run into the guy. We walk up 10 flights of stairs and then climb the ladder onto the roof. My friend is impressed, and the view is awesome. As we were about to head back down, my friend waiting on the street calls us. He says that the man had passed out in the street, and the two of them pulled him out of the way of traffic and called the ambulance for him. They suggested we waited out on the roof to avoid exiting the building while the cops were there. Neither of us can afford a $5,000 fine or 2-week jail time for just looking at the city from an abandoned building. We wait, but we probably shouldn't have waited on the roof. We get the all clear from my friend to come back down, and we head to the ladder. My friend goes first, and then our flashlight dies. The ladder is tricky to get onto when you can't see it and it's missing some rings, so I come down very slowly in the dark, afraid of hurting myself. I hop down, and my friend tells me very quietly that he hears someone in the room next to us. I shrug it off, and we already know people are in the building. Then the screaming starts. At first, it almost sounds like one of my friends who waited outside yelling my name. I hesitate at the top of the stairs, just outside the door of the room the screaming is coming from, trying to decide if it's him and if he's playing some sort of a prank. The guy I came into the building with grabs my wrists, and we start running down the stairs. At this point, it's obvious it's not my friend. It's just a guttural, intense screaming. We start running down the stairs, and then hear a really loud banging to go with the screaming. It sounds like this guy has a very heavy object that he's swinging at the walls, exposing pipes with. There is only one flight of stairs, because every other way down is an out-of-order freight elevator. So we're trapped in the stairwell, and it's 10 flights till we reach the ground floor, and I have to book it to the opposite side of this factory and back out of the hole we climbed through. Besides screaming and swinging that heavy object, we hear him barreling down the stairs behind us, but he is at least one floor behind. Whatever he is using to hit the walls and pipes with is clearly enough to do some damage to our skulls, because a bit of brick chipped off the wall and followed us down the steps. And that's when my friend grabs my wrist again and throws me through the nearest door. We've only made it down 3 floors. At the beginning of each flight of stairs, there is one door that opens onto the entire level. In other words, it's painfully obvious where we've gone. After flying into this room, we noticed it had been gutted like every other floor, but more of the windows are boarded up and it's very dark. All that's in my room to hide behind, all that's in this room to hide behind are some pillars. We get behind one and huddle together. The guy stops outside of the doorway to the room. We're in, and he's still screaming. It's terrifying. Then he starts swinging his weapon around and slamming into the door frame. We're sure he's going to come in, and the only way out is the door he is currently standing in. Neither of us look around the pillar to see the guy, and we have no idea what his weapon is. Nearly 4 minutes pass, and he hasn't stopped screaming. For whatever reason, he doesn't come into the room we're in, but he just starts running down the stairs. We can hear him hitting pipes and smacking the walls, and we just wait. We have 7 floors to go down, and we could pass him in any doorway on the way down. Eventually, the screaming and banging stops, but we still think we should wait. That's when we hear something from a different corner of the room. There's just enough light from the window in the back that hasn't been boarded up, and we see a figure get up off the floor. This person has been in the room with us the entire 7 or 8 minutes we've been in here, and they haven't let on until now. This person, who is in front of the only light source, so we just see a totally black figure, is now shuffling towards us without making a sound. It's exactly like a zombie movie, and we run. We don't bother to find out what this person's deal is, and temporarily forget about the first, clearly dangerous guy. For an asthmatic, I hauled ass down the stairs and never paused to catch my breath even once. As we were reaching the bottom of the stairwell, the screaming starts again. It's coming from the room next to us, but we don't stop running. The hole in the wall that we climbed through to get into the building is yards away, and the man comes crashing out of the room behind us. We never look back and climb through the hole so fast I don't even remember doing it. Our 2 friends are waiting for us, and we throw ourselves into the car. They asked us what happened, because apparently that man was so loud that they could hear him screaming and breaking things from outside the building. They thought we were making all that noise, and were going to give it a few minutes before calling us to remind us that the police were still patrolling the area for drunk underage college students, and we should probably hurry up. We tell them what had happened, and then decide to carry on with our plans for the night, because a beer was totally a must after that. A few years ago, I found a long-forgotten water refinery through the help of an online exploration community in Google Earth. Although it's stupid, I always go to places for the first time alone, partly for the thrill and partly because if something bad were to happen, I would feel terrible having brought someone else into that situation. So I make plans to head there the next day after I get out of class. The day of the trip, I pack up my camera and water bottle and set off following my drawn map. The downside of not having a printer. After an hour or 2 of biking, I finally arrive at the place, which luckily had an old bike path dead-ending just past it. It was completely overtaken by vegetation, with trees growing up through and around the buildings, not to mention that the actual buildings were just disintegrating, with paint peeling off of every wall and ceiling. I took my time, scoring each of the buildings, looking around for anything interesting. I found hundreds of broken windows, weird broken spheres, and some kind of green giant oven. After an hour or 2 of successful exploring, I decided to head off happy with an SD card full of pictures. Soon after, I pulled my bike back out through the hole in the fence. I entered and started biking away. I remembered there was one last shot I wanted to get. I'm pretty insistent on getting the shots I want, and I didn't know if I would ever come back. So I decided to just tough it out, ride back and take the picture. As I was going back, I saw a lone man dressed in old clothes walking down the bike trail away from the dead end. I thought it was kind of a strange path for someone to take a walk on, and something in me said, "Don't let him see you go in there." I biked past him, gave him a slight head nod, and figured I'd bike all the way to the end of the trail, turn around, and by the time I got back, he'd be long gone. Having continued in the opposite direction, I leisurely take my time, getting to the end and turn around. As I head back toward the hole in the fence, I see him there, staring at me, and walking back toward the dead end which he came from. He had a happy look on his face, but it wasn't the kind of happiness that made me feel at ease in any way. The best way I could describe it is that he looked like he had just been told a very dirty joke and was trying to contain it. I knew I had to do something, and I was literally trapped between him and a dead end. I decided to play it cool once more, but be ready to drop everything and run if things got hairy. As I get closer and closer to him, I can see his facial expression clearer, and it's not someone I want to be in the same state with, let alone the same bike path. I'm silently cursing myself for going back for one more picture as I slowly get closer. Finally, I'm about 20 feet away from him, and he calls out, "I sure would like a ride. It's such a hot day out. Mind if I jump on?" As soon as I hear this, I realize this is no longer my brain falsely interpreting something as creepy. I pick up speed and rush past him, putting as much space between us as I can. I now look behind me and see that he's once again turned around and following me. At this point, I bolt, sprinting down the bike path and back onto the road. Interestingly enough, I stopped by a nearby gas station on the way home to get a refill on my Gatorade. I see a cop there and told him I just rode down the old bike path by this park, and he looked at me, sort of bewildered as to why a person would ride out there, or at least that's what I guessed from behind his sunglasses. And he told me he didn't recommend people going there, especially alone, as some shady characters like to hang out there. I wish I could say I stayed away, but I went back one other time with a girl and had a completely different but almost as creepy experience. It's a shorter story, and it's not even worth mentioning.